This recording is from the All Island Women's Forum Residential in November 2023. The forum is made up of 40 women from across the island who come together to look at issues in areas of commonality north and south and identify key areas that can be addressed on an all-island basis. The All Island Women's Forum is an inclusive space for women's voices, including those often left out of the conversation for minority communities. The forum has been an important space to foster greater all-island partnerships and model the potential for greater cooperation across the island of Ireland. My name's Rachel Coyle. I'm head of campaigns and mobilization in the National Women's Council, and I'm lucky to have been part of the journey of the All Island Women's Forum. This is a recording of a discussion between forum members on the cost of living crisis, not just the financial impact, but the implications the crisis has had on morale, mental health, and living standards in our communities. We know that the increases in the cost of living have had a disproportionate impact on women and marginalized communities in both jurisdictions. Talking with forum members, we reflected on the economic inequality faced by women in Ireland and the many examples of fight back from the community and voluntary sector and within the trade union movement. I hope you enjoy.
We're joined by Eilish Rooney, Belinda Nugent, Adele O'Connor, Lisa Wilson and Nuala Toman here to talk about this. And how I'm going to start it off is actually with Lisa. Lisa's actually here today in place of Ethel Buckley, one of our forum members, and Lisa's a senior economist at the Nevin Economic Research Institute and is based in Belfast. So because we haven't had the opportunity to get to know Lisa before, I might just ask you, Lisa, to tell us a little bit about the work that you do.
Yeah. So thanks very much for having me along. The NERI is a trade union funded think tank, a left-leaning think tank which looks at a range of economic and labour market issues. I specifically work in the area of labour markets, and also much of my work would focus on gender inequalities and economic inequalities faced by women. So in that kind of sense, I want to give you a flavour of the trade union kind of angle on behalf of Ethel, who couldn't be here today, and touch on some of the things that the trade union movement is doing. Of course, of which the NERI feeds into, so we were set up by the umbrella of trade unions that are part of the ICTU. And so much of our work feeds into the work then of the trade union movement and back out in terms of guiding the direction of the kinds of works that, that the trade union movement might want to see or might need evidence on in a research-based way. A lot of my work has, in recent years, been focused on issues to do with gender pay gaps, gender inequalities, inequalities in terms of our models of economic performance and how the undervaluing of unpaid care work and unpaid domestic work links into, I suppose, subsidising of our current market economy. So how the undervaluing of unpaid work effectively subsidising means that much of a market economy can exist in the nature that it does, but relies on it, unpaid care work, which is unvalued and which is obviously, we know, predominantly carried out by women. And this is linking into but it's related to this global value chain of unpaid work. So I recognise, for example, I am a woman of privilege. I've got two children. Somebody is caring for them today. The people who are caring for them most likely have families of their own, of which they're most likely relying on unpaid work. So there's this global value chain going on in terms of our unpaid care work, which isn't just affecting all women the same, but there is multiple different layers and intersectionalities to this, and the different ways in which that feeds into our model of economic performance. So that's the broader piece of work, I suppose, the thinking piece which is going on in my work at the minute. Then more hitting the desk, producing output pieces on a timely basis. I've been doing work in and around the gender pay gap, both in Northern Ireland and in the Republic. We are an all-island think tank. So most recently, the two pieces of work, I had done a piece of work which was on the unadjusted gender pay gap. That's taking the pay which males and females get on an hourly basis, a weekly basis, an annual basis, and comparing that both north and south. And so if we take the characteristics of male and female, so females with a degree, males with a degree, males in full-time employment versus females in employment, and hold all things equal, what is explaining the differences between pay between males and females, and once we control for all things, what does the picture look like? And what the picture looked like, certainly in the case of Northern Ireland, is that all things equal, women actually should be paid more than men. their characteristics in terms of their labour market productivity, earning characteristics are superior. They're more likely to have degrees, they're more likely to work in those higher paid occupations. And Northern Ireland is unique in that sense, I suppose, but still nonetheless, females on the scale of things earn less than males. And that suggests, a picture of not necessarily discrimination, but then things like, okay, whenever females have a degree, what kinds of degrees do they have? What is the earning power of those degrees? When females work in particular industries, they might be higher paid industries, so to speak, but are they reaching the upper echelons of those industries? So the nuance then starts to come out in the picture, and I'm following that Northern Ireland paper up with a specific paper for the Republic of Ireland. But I suppose the last point then, what my work has and around this area of gender pay gaps has tried to amplify over the past number of years is the complete dearth of statistics and data at a national level from our government in the Republic of Ireland specifically to be able to look at issues to do with economic inequality across the genders. And what that amounts to is that each year when we're getting national statistics, it tends to be some years we'll get it on a median national hourly basis, some years we'll get it on a weekly basis, some years we don't have a like-for-like comparison over time. And that means that no matter what pressure you put on government policymakers to try and affect change, the answer can always be, well, we don't know how much of that is actually to do with the fact that the data that we're using is different. We do have, though, CSO in the past, since the pandemic, really have started to link administrative pay data to our labour force survey, and they are going to be extrapolate that back over time, so we will be able to get a consistent picture of what has been happening to the gender pay gap in Ireland in a way that we haven't been able to do until now, and then to look at the role or the impact of different characteristics. But that necessity for national data, which is on a consistent basis, is so important to understanding the gender pay gap and to be able to affect change and to be able to convince policymakers that something needs to be done about it. Yeah, so lastly, I suppose, on the cost of living, the NERI was involved in a piece of work with UCD called the Working in Ireland survey. So what that did in 2021, we done a nationally representative survey of workers right across the island. And myself and John Geary, who's an academic in UCD, have been writing a paper looking at job quality. So it doesn't just focus on pay, it focuses on all of the aspects of work, from the autonomy that you have at work to the intensity of your work to your security of your work, across 14 different attributes. And it tries to look at the picture of employment conditions in Ireland. And the picture in terms of the quality of employment which females face in comparison to males is stark. And then within particular occupations. So when we looked within the caring occupations, and we do it in a visual kind of dashboard sense, go from red to green, like a traffic light sense, it's just a series of reds. And it's stark across, when you compare the occupations across the rest of them, the quality of employment within the caring occupations is fundamentally poor, no matter what attribute you look at. So that's linking in then to the broader piece of work about the global value chain and we're focusing on getting all women effectively to work like men now. Our model of upping the economic positions of women is to make them all work like men, get them into the labour market and get them all working full time. And I really worry about that when it's particularly as it relates to the caring occupations. You've got so many women who used to stay at home and look after their kids. Now they're working in the paid care work sector. And they're not necessarily economically more advantaged as a result of that. And there's real policy challenge to be able to look at that, not just in relation to pay, but across all of the different attributes of employment. And I'll leave it for there, because then that's where I'll come and to talk about the role which the collective bargaining agreement can have, and in terms of improving the conditions right across the scope for women.
Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, no, as you can see, it's very important to have Lisa here with us for this discussion. That was really, really interesting. But I'm kind of going to maybe change tact a little bit here and talk about the services, the community centres, the community activism, and I suppose the real life impact of the cost of living crisis in that type of work. So, Belinda, if it's okay, I might just start with you, and if you could tell us how you've seen the cost of living impacting in your community and in your work.
Yeah, I suppose in Dublin, northeast inner city is where I'm based, and we are specifically focusing on women poverty and housing, specifically in the private rental market. As you can imagine, it's not just a private rented that's knocked on the door, it's people that are owning their own homes, it's people that is also in social housing, it's people who is homeless, migrants, refugees, everybody, and you don't refuse anybody from the door, anybody who knocks you and fight in. How the cost of living has affected people in three ways. One would be around food poverty, rental markets, and especially parents with children with autism. So they would be the main three ones that I'd like to just touch on. I suppose when you talk about cost of living, it's also how it's tied to income that is coming into the home. So if that's a lone parent that's on a set amount of money, she has to try to manage childcare. She also has to try to manage the bills, the energy increase. We know there's a gas increase. So all the bills is going up, but yeah, her lone parent payment wouldn't be going up. So now that parent has a child with autism, and now the services that she wants to link in with are not available. She probably has to get an assessment, it's not available. So now think of the cost of trying to get a private assessment, which these barriers just continuously go on and on. So the cost of living is that she doesn't have the money that's coming into her home to meet the needs of her child with autism, of putting on the heating. And Bernardo's done a study, and they found that 1 in 5 parents actually are finding it hard to put food on the table some weeks. Some weeks they're cutting back or not feeding themselves. And we're actually seeing that when people are knocking in the doors. We're lucky to have Bernardo's next door to us, and we work really well with them. There was 2 studies done on the private rental market. One was by daft.ie, another one by myhome.ie. Sorry, they're 2 websites where probably people will know is in the south of Ireland. And if you're looking to rent a home or if you're looking to purchase a home, they're kind of websites where you can access that information. And 75% have to look, 75% on the home.ie survey found that people have to look outside their first choice area to rent. And when I was reading that statistic, I was thinking of all the individuals that's coming in and knocking on our doors. And these are individuals that probably have low literacies, low self-esteem, people that has dual diagnosis issues, people that has mental health issues, people that just don't feel safe moving out of where they're living because they're from disadvantaged, deprived areas. And I was thinking about the amount of time I said, well, you know, if we look just out a little bit further, maybe 2 months, I won't know anybody. How will I get the travel? I don't have a bus pass. So then the cost of even travelling to family and supports became an issue. So it's all these little things that if you think of somebody on a social welfare payment, for example, again, the cost of living is just affecting them again and again. And there's actually 85% of the people in that study found that the government could and should be doing more to help renters. So we were having this conversation last night over a cup of tea, and I thought it was probably good to bring up. We were actually talking about the amount of people that is seeing the increase of their rent. So basically, if we go back to, about 18 months ago, there was a 1-bedroom apartment in Dublin 1 area for €935. Grand every month. You know, that was, easy to be able to pay for out of the rent. That's gone up to 2,365 in 18 months. Just think of the cost. So again, who's now being locked out of that market straight away? Obviously, it's people that's probably after living in the area or people on social welfare. So there's payments like the housing assistance payment and the rental accommodation scheme in the south, where these would be 2 kind of supplementary payments to help with rent. Sure, even with them, and they've done an increase, I just know, in the last budget, up 35%. Still can't live in their areas, still have to move out. So I have my own theory on gentrification and everything, but we won't get into that. That's for another day. But there's the one about food poverty. And this one is huge because there's a lot of people, and these are people who's working. So they'd be working in childcare and they'd be working in all the care services. And they're going to the food banks for food. you know, there's something really wrong there. There's something really missing there. There was one as well just on the autism and children, and it was just something that I picked up and I thought I'd share it. And it just says, research suggests that there is additional cost of living with a disability is between 9,500 and 11,700 annually. In the case of autism, this rises to as high as 28,464 due to a loss of earnings involved in meeting the needs of an autistic person. Think of that cost of living. Think of that massive amount of money now that's on a pressure, that's on a person. When we think of trauma and we think of how the effects on somebody's mental health. So the cost of living in those three areas would be huge. I do want to just say, and I know we'll probably talk about it, of like how we can move forward and look at this. But what we've done and how we've kind of, not pushed back, well, it is pushing back, but yeah, we've trained up the people with lived experience. So the people that's living in poverty, the people with children with autism, the people that's living in the dire, slum-like conditions, I would definitely say, is we've done it through peer-led research. They went out and knocked on doors of people that is living in really deprived, run-down accommodations. With that information, now what they have done is we went over to Europe. They went over and talked to the MEPs. What's the policies over here? What can we go bring back to Ireland? What can we lobby and campaign? They're a really group of activists that's getting bored now of this, but the women have now come back and now they're looking at sustainable development goals. Ireland has signed up to it. Guess what? So has the UK. This could be the cross-border way if we all work together as well. If you think of goal number 1, no poverty. If you think of goal, sustainable development goal number 5, gender equality. If you think of sustainable development goals, sustainable cities, sustainable communities. You can localise all this. Because when you think of food poverty, there's sustainable development goal. You think of gender pay gaps, there's number 5. If you think of retrofitting in these slum-like accommodation, here you go, Sustainable Development Goals number 11. So there's a lot of local campaigns that can be brought from the global, national and local levels. And the women are really getting fired up now about using these. Because the government has signed up to it. So now let's lobby them and make them accountable. So I'll leave it there for now.
No, thanks, Belinda. That's brilliant. Adele, I'll come to you next because, obviously, like in your work, you're sort of building capacity and working with people. But when we hear of all of these challenges stacked on top of, I'd love to just hear from you about how the cost of living is impacting on your work.
Good morning, everyone, and thanks for asking me to speak here today. I'm a little bit nervous, so.
Don't be here among friends.
So, I'm a lone parent. It took me a long time to actually admit I was a lone parent because of such a stigma, and there's a lot of stereotypes out there about being a lone parent still, about they don't work and they don't do this and they don't do the other. And I'm the programme coordinator in Doras in Coolock in Dublin, and we are one of the CDPs who survived the cull of the community development projects in 2009 when the organisations went from 182 CDPs to just 20. This is where I believe the current cost of living crisis began. There was neoliberal policies brought in and a lot of communities lost vital services and supports, and the funding applications start bringing in words like value for money, ROI, return on investment, economic costs and numbers rather than social impact. Funding streams were changed to social enterprise models where organisations have to prove that they can be self-sufficient and be able to fund a certain part of their services. So, as I said, we're primarily a lone parent organisation, but we're open to all families. But 90% of the families that we work with are headed by women, as they're more likely primary carers at home. We know about being disproportionately affected by the housing crisis. I won't even go into that, it's huge. Again, the women are carrying the burden of this. There's a childcare crisis ready to erupt. Can't get a crash place. The compliancy, the administration and the funding implications of running crashes have closed crashes left, right and centre. And there has been huge funding put in by the government, but it's put in the wrong place and it's not supporting community crashes. It's neoliberal policies, so aiming more towards privatisation. I also had a look at the mental health statistics, north and south, and men are more likely to die by suicide. However, if you live in a deprived area rather than an affluent area, you're twice as likely to die by suicide. Both north and south, the statistics are very similar. So just to give you an idea of a lone parent's life, we do a lot for our children, and as people have said, they will go without food and without clothes and without whatever, so that children don't have to. And we had a focus group recently about caring, and one of the things that was said in the group was that lone parents hate to see their children coming home with an invitation to a birthday party. Even though the children are so excited, it's just another burden that something is going to have to be sacrificed so that child can go with all the other children in the class to the birthday party. And then I just have a couple of case studies here that I'm going to just talk about, just to put. These are real people, but I've changed their names. So last week we had a drop-in. So we provide information and support service, we provide counselling services, we have a sensory space for children with autism and additional needs and adults. And then we have a teen parent support programme, and we have adult education programmes. We do family events and things like that, but we've also a drop-in service. So it's Doras, which is the Irish for yellow door. It means the door is always open. Martina has been involved with our services for years. She's 4 children, so our relationship broke down and she was left parenting alone. It's not a choice, we can't walk away from the children. And all the children went through the early years service. We have a fantastic early years service, and all the children are educated before they go to school, and they go up to a level, they're just brilliant. It's great to see. And all the children went through the crash, and she started in the adult education courses, so she was very shy, lacking in confidence, but it built slowly. She struggled with her mental health, and we supported her with adult counselling now. So she phoned us to say our oldest daughter, age 16, she wanted to refer her to the teen parent support programme. She just discovered she was pregnant. So it was 2021, we couldn't meet people face to face, so we just had to have phone calls with them. And she was speaking to one of the workers on the phone, and she said to them that the confirmation of one of our children had been moved twice, and due to this she had to buy all the children new clothes again because they'd all grown out of the clothes. So these are things, decisions are made, and there's no consideration for the impact on the family. So she went on to talk about that, and the community worker said, good luck with the confirmation and all. So the child made a confirmation, and unfortunately she died by suicide the day after. And her death impacted all the staff and all the participants in the organisation. So I don't think we're in a cost of living crisis, I think we're in a cost of life crisis. Like, what is the value or the return on investment or the economic cost of a mother who has no other choice, in her opinion, than to end her life?
Thanks very much, Adele. Maybe just take a minute with that. The cuts to the funding to the community sector is something we've talked about a lot in the forum this year. We've tried to support one another, talk about ways to overcome barriers, but I suppose that's the impact of that. So Nuala, I'm going to come to you next because I know that thank you very much. Previously you've come and you've talked to us about the cuts to the funding in the north and just the dire situation facing the sector in the north. Also, you're coming from the Disability Federation, and disabled people are disproportionately impacted by the cost of living, and we heard some of that this morning. In general, their additional needs just maybe aren't thought about, and the additional costs to those needs. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit to us about that.
So at the minute, in the north, we're in the midst of a political, economic, social, cost of living, health, housing emergency, and public services, community services, and people are, really feeling pain as a result of this. All of this is avoidable harm. It's as a result of decision making or non-decision making, and it's really quite disturbing. So at present, the budget that was allocated to the north is at least 0.8 billion short of what it should be, probably more. And public services and community services have been cut at an alarming rate. So 62 organisations lost their core funding on the 30th of September, and that includes the organisation that I work for, Disability Action, Women's Aid, the Hospice, Relate, Contact,
and the list goes on. And all of those organisations provide vital services to people. And we really need to look at this, because obviously we're considering the impact of the cost of living emergency on people, but I just want to reflect it back to decision making. There was a decision taken to allocate insufficient resources to the north, which is leading to people being put into severe crisis. Yeah. We know disabled people are starving, heavily reliant on food banks, making really, really restrictive and difficult choices around whether they're going to eat or use life-saving machinery. The cuts to the housing budget has reduced access to housing adaptation grants. There are only 1,111 adapted social homes in the whole region, and yet 1 in 4 people are disabled. So where do disabled people go to live? And we're in contact with countless disabled people who are living in really unsafe, unsanitary conditions. We have disabled women who have had to make makeshift toilets in their kitchens. One family that we worked with, single parent of 2 disabled children, was harassed out of her home through disability hate crime and is living in really inappropriate temporary accommodation that is having a really significant impact on her mental health. Now, that harassment, because again, we're in the midst of this political crisis that has caused a vacuum of accountability, and issues like hate crime are rising, coercive control in estates, increased levels of criminality, paramilitary activity, sexual exploitation, financial exploitation, and all of this. And this particular case is just, where this woman had to leave her home, is just one example where a house was targeted because it was adapted, and someone else in the estate wanted that adapted home, so the family are hounded out. Yeah. And this isn't a one-off. This is happening regularly because there is an interest in having an adapted home. So people are being displaced into unsafe housing solutions that just aren't fit for purpose. And on top of that, we're seeing disabled people being exploited at food banks. So they're going to a food bank to get food and then being approached by illegal lenders, given money, and the person believes that they're being helped, and then ends up caught up in a whole cycle of criminality where their medication is taken off them to sell on the street. Their home is used as a site to store illegal items, everything from drugs to stolen goods. We're seeing homes where there's a disabled person living alone and reliant on carers coming in and out, where young people are using those homes as a site to have parties, irrespective of whether that person wants those people in their home, and everything goes on. And this is in the context of the complete erosion of services for support. So prior to the 30th of September, we could provide information and advice to assist those people, and all of that has been removed. We've effectively become a clearinghouse for Tory economic policy, and it really makes you question where you're at, because yes, we can still provide transport, we can still provide our mobility services, and we can still provide some mental health support. But the majority of our work is linked to addressing economic inactivity of disabled people. And when you come at things from a human rights-based framework, you can kind of square that when you have the ability to undertake human rights-driven work, so that when you know that you're working with people in the context of access and employment. And I mean, yes, disabled people want to work, and they want to work in good jobs and all of that. But the money that has come through the Shared Prosperity Programme is, about addressing economic inactivity, and it doesn't come from a progressive standpoint. And yes, we are the recipients of that funding, and it really does challenge yourself as a community and human rights activist, in that, previously we could have worked with disabled people and ensured that their income was maximised, that they had protection in terms of access and employment, and that's everything from supporting people against discrimination right through. And now our services are really restricted, but it's not just us. This is happening across the board. And I really question the right of civil servants to make those decisions. So the British government enacted legislation that enabled civil servants to make decisions about people's lives. Those decisions are supposed to be taken in the public interest. It is not in the public interest to completely erode public services. And yet it's happening. And when we hear some civil servants kind of speak about the reasons why they're making the decisions, they really focus on the need to balance the budget, but neglect all of the other aspects in the guidance that pertain to how the decision should be made. And I just wonder what's going to be left at the end of all of this. And just one very stark example, the gap between people living in the north and people living elsewhere is growing daily. You know, the Westminster government produced a disability action plan. It is by no means perfect. Disabled people in England really question it and, you know, question whether it's fit for purpose. But there's 13 billion within that strategy to invest in education for disabled people. That 13 billion is almost the size of the block grant that goes to the north, the entirety of it. And any new spending in that disability action plan will not go into our budget. It goes against debt that the north is said to have accrued, and things just get smaller and smaller and darker and darker, and we're left with absolutely no scope for investment. And rights are being rolled back on a daily basis, and we have no accountability measures to challenge this beyond the courts.
Yeah, thanks, Nuala. Yeah, it's really shocking, and you're so right. You know, we hear this all the time about balancing the budget and, you know, this business approach to our society. It doesn't work, it doesn't stack up, and Eilish, I might come to you then, because, I mean, we know here, and we talk about it all the time, talk about peace building, women's role in peace building, and I suppose how fragile the peace here, is in this island. We know that peace is sustained through equality and through prosperity and opportunity. So can you tell us a little bit about maybe just kind of reflecting on some of the things that have been said here?
I could do that, and that would take a little more time than I want to take. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just be a footnote. And I call the footnote true equality. I think that's the radical, powerful term that's used in the Women's Council. True equality is one of your aims. So in order to apply true equality to the North, what you have to understand is, and it's an understanding that we all have, but we really don't pay attention to the implications of it. What you have to understand is that the North is a constitutionally divided society. That hasn't come up in our discussion so far.
That's true, yeah.
And that's absolutely fine. But you really need to understand that, because that has ramifications. Inequality patterns continue to reflect that. That hasn't been rectified since the 1998 agreement. The levels of inequality that reflect nationalism and unionism in the North, in the most deprived areas, hasn't changed, despite progressive legislation that should have made a difference. It hasn't changed. But being constitutionally divided also impacts on the potential and the possibility of women uniting across division to mobilise around issues of equality within a divided, constitutionally divided society. And this applies not just in the North, but in other places as well. That section of the community that wishes to maintain the status quo and the position of relative power and relative wealth feels threatened and is threatened by any push towards equality from and by that part of the community that seeks change. So the section of a community, wherever we're looking in the world, and I'm applying it to ourselves in the North, the section of the community that is seeking change, that is mobilising for progressive change, in quotes, benefits from feminism, benefits from civil rights, benefits from mobilisation against the state and welcomes it and enlists it in its push for change. This is a broad generalisation. The section of the community that is threatened by that and looks to lose from that inevitably is often silenced. Those progressive elements within that community, such as feminism, is often silenced by the power of the positioning of trying to defend the status quo. So that, recently, a quite progressive loyalist women's voices organisation that was promoting feminism and was quite active in promoting women's voices within the loyalist community had to shut down because it was attacked by unionist women from the unionist community who saw it as a threat. This might be an unexpected turn to constitutional conversations, if you like. It's some way ahead, but we are heading in the direction of a referendum at some point, as agreed in the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. Right, yeah. So that is some way ahead, and some women within unionism, some of these women see the constitutional conversations, mobilisation, as an opportunity to push for more progressive policies from within unionism. Progressive voices see the opportunity of calling on political leadership within unionism to present a case that's attractive to women. What's going to be the UK following a referendum that is unsuccessful for unity? What's the UK going to be the pitch, if you like, the offer to women from women, for women within Northern Ireland that will attract women's voices and votes within Northern Ireland? What will be the pitch? So you can see that, you know, unexpectedly, if you like, sometimes a crisis is an opportunity. That women speaking up or women engaging in these conversations at a level where they're almost invisible in public. And Eileen would have been great making a contribution to this.
Yeah.
I mean, her belief is that if we'd had a Bill of Rights in Northern Ireland, the constitutional conversation mightn't have taken off in the same way as it has.
Right. Yeah.
She thinks the Bill of Rights proposal was like a new constitution for Northern Ireland. So there are really interesting conversations going on. We need to make space for hearing from women who are differently positioned. Now, I'm giving you a complex picture in a very simple way, but I am wanting to have this footnote to our discussion, which tries to understand the complexity of a constitutionally divided society on this island and what you have to deal with whenever you're trying to understand issues of equality where we live. And the challenges to women who are silenced by belonging to a community that defends the status quo and ultimately is compelled to defend the status quo, if you like. And defending the status quo leads to a kind of conservatism and a conservatism of politics that we don't mention either. That power sharing in the north is power sharing between a conservative, retrogressive group that seeks to defend the status quo and I'm putting it in quotes, a progressive group that seeks change. But as soon as, of course, power sharing came into play, then it was into trading, as there always is in any government. But another thing that just, and I'll end on this, that you have to understand is that the departments in the north are run by different political parties. So that you're not speaking to a government in the same way as you are in the south. And I'm not saying that that's simple at all. But, you know, the division, the constitutional division in the north affects everything. We mostly, as feminists, cope with that by remaining silent about it and mobilising around what we can mobilise around and be progressive about what we can be progressive and try and make space for voices that aren't heard and make room for progressive politics within unionism as far as possible. But that's a huge challenge for women within unionism.
It's incredibly important. Yeah, it's almost the elephant in the room anytime you're trying to talk about any economic progress. And I'd say, you know, obviously for Southern members here, it's incredibly important to just hear that and to have that in mind when we talk about North-South collaboration and working with the, you know, our sisters in the North. But just to kind of talk a little bit, maybe Lisa, about the trade union movement and that, the collective bargaining campaign. Tell us a little bit about that and how we can support it.
Yeah, so I suppose there's two key things I think, and the first relates to that kind of gender pay gap transparency legislation and the role which the gender pay gap transparency legislation can have in facilitating trade unionists when they're engaging with employers on the ground in terms of negotiating pay deals or terms and conditions deals, I suppose, is that for the first time they're going to have company level information so that when we are negotiating or when negotiations are happening in terms of, it's not necessarily, some employers find it difficult or, pay is in some sectors of our economy is difficult. But this is how it relates to that broader piece of work, I suppose, that I'm doing in job quality. There's many different attributes about a person's job that isn't just about their pay. It's about the intensification of their work. It's about the autonomy that they have at work. It's about their security. It's about their prospects. One of the biggest things that affects females in terms of the lifetime gender pay gap is opportunities for progression. And oftentimes, to be able to progress through the steps of your career or whatever, it requires training and continuous professional development. And we know that in those things that there's things that employers can do but often just don't think about. And for the first time, this legislation gives trade unionists the ability to have those conversations in a room with a person where, often things can be done that require just an understanding and a negotiation that doesn't necessarily cost them more money or impact on their bottom line or whatever, but it has a real effect on the day-to-day lives of women and be able to participate in work and also just to carry out their work to that kind of gender piece. And I know Ethel sees real value in the childcare SRO and the impact that can have on the gender pay gap, because it's not tinkering around the edges. For the first time, it gives huge swathes of our workers, childcare workers, most of which are women, a floor ultimately that was above the floor that we're at. That sort of huge scale change, and that's the importance then of sectoral order agreements or the legislation which is being transposed over the coming years, the minimum wages directive, which is seeking to try and cover 80% of our economy by sectoral order agreements. That sort of legislation can have huge impact in terms of gender equality and gender economic equality impacts, because it's not just piecemeal and getting wins here and there. It can bring bunches of women up pay levels at a time, and that's the sort of impact that you need to be able to affect national wage gaps or whatever. So those are the two key areas that I think that I wanted to touch on.
And I think it's important to say as well that, the trade union movement didn't do this kind of out of the good of their hearts. Like, there's thousands of childcare workers that advocated, mobilised, were on the streets. And, we're working with a lot of them now to call for a public childcare model in the south and in the north, because we know the north is one of the most expensive places when we think of people's income, compared to childcare.
It was the common force that was made about civil servants kind of running the show up north. They're doing it in the south too. And that is that civil servants are seemingly not listening to the people on the ground. They don't want anything community-led. They want this NEIC initiative approach, which is a business model, which is top-heavy down. It's quietening and silencing the communities, and we had enough. And it's just that, when you said that, I was like, it's going on everywhere, isn't it? It's like they hold the purse strings. We should have a voice, like as a community, we should be able to represent and speak for the vulnerable people. That's why we're there. I suppose the last thing that I just want to say is, thanks very much for the opportunity to come and speak. As you were saying, it does be an honour to come and share the information. But I agree, we do have to do something. And I think that if we look, even if it was on the 8th of March, if even looking at the Sustainable Development Goals, or even there's a campaign there, add the 10th campaign to the 9 ground of discrimination, which is the socioeconomic discrimination. So you're not judged on how you speak. where you're from, which there's a massive thing on in the private rental sector on that. It's another day's conversation. But there's so much we could do there if we locked heads together. And we have a great community women's activist group that would like to get involved in it too. So thanks again, Rachel.
No, thank you, Belinda. It's been so good to get to know you a bit better. Nuala, maybe I'll come to you next.
So I was really struck by how similar, like what we said actually was, because all of the issues that were raised were the same, just occurring in different contexts. And I think sometimes, because of the way the island is structured, that we forget that this is happening everywhere, because people think it's just happening where I am. But actually, women across this island are facing the same marginalisation, erosion of rights and loss, and just listening to you, Adele, I think everyone's heart is with you there on this sense of loss and devastation that you shared, and that's only one story, that is only one story from one organisation. And because of that shared experience, there has to be shared solutions, because the challenges that we face are so similar. I think as a group that we can really work out exactly what the asks are and think about how they can, how they can be delivered. And like last night we were talking about kind of socioeconomic issues and how people, who are perceived to be from areas of deprivation or living in social housing, can be discriminated against, and the need to protect against, people being discriminated against because of their social background. And I think that's a really powerful ask that we could all collectively call for, because it would disproportionately improve women's lives. And the other thing, just to flag, there is this piece of legislation in the north, it's section 28A of the Good Friday Agreement as amended by the St Andrews Agreement, in which there is a statutory duty to target resources on the basis of objective need. That has never been used. In spite of some decisions around school meals that were so minimal, that statutory duty around how to target economic resources has never been used. And there was a case taken by CAJ, which pointed out that the executive needed to do two things. One was have an anti-poverty strategy, and the other was to target resources on the basis of objective need. The public discourse is always sat at the level of the anti-poverty strategy, because it's very difficult to kind of articulate what the difference would be if financial decisions were made on the basis of need rather than whatever basis of evidence or political whim or whatever basis a decision is being made, but actually to think about what would be the difference for those women who can't get housing, can't get resources, if actually public finance decisions were based on getting resources to those women rather than directing them elsewhere.
Yeah. Lisa, do you want to come back in?
Just quickly, I suppose, being around data, the need in the Republic for proper data and around the gender pay gap. And in Northern Ireland, there's a lack of data as it comes to poverty statistics. So the poverty statistics that we get from Northern Ireland just tends to focus on income. We don't get information on the depth of poverty, the deprivation stuff, the food banks, the information. And, although the Republic is not, excellent in terms of the data provision around that, we just don't have that information for Northern Ireland. We've got no information on deprivation statistics since about 2012, when the Poverty and Social Exclusion Survey happened. So again, I think there is space within the Shared Island Fund to be able to try and do something around North-South poverty statistics. So there's impossible action there to be able to try and press on, and I'll finish there.
Thanks very much, Lisa. It's incredibly important to have this space that we get angry, be sad, be angry together, but we can demand change. So thanks so much for everybody's participation. That was really powerful. Thanks very much.
Thank you for listening to this recording of a panel discussion that was held at the All Island Women's Forum Residential This is part of a series of recordings of the All Island Women's Forum, and this project was funded by the Department of Foreign Affairs.